Rajiv, do you know, this conversation is flowing so nicely. It's like you're reading my mind, because we're talking about the world of entertainment. And I know you love rap, right? I know you love, we'll get to that in a minute. But I know you also love the world of WWE, the world of world wrestling entertainment.
Yep.
So please tell me, have you been able to find any similarities between WWE and sales and selling?
There's a long blog post I need to write at some point, but the idea here, and you know, my market is startups, so I'll use the word startups, but it could probably apply to anything. But every startup is a pro wrestler. Here's why I say that, okay? A pro wrestler, and I will caveat, yes, I am aware it is a scripted program, just like when I watch anything on Netflix, I am aware it is a scripted program, but I don't not watch it because it's scripted. So anyways, now that we've gotten that out of the way, I'm aware it's scripted. In wrestling, your entire goal as a wrestler is to get over with the crowd. Meaning, if you're a good guy, get them to cheer you. If you're a bad guy, get them to boo you. The worst thing that can happen in wrestling is you walk out and you get a flat reaction. You get no reaction from the audience. Those are the wrestlers who don't stick around too long, regardless of how good they actually are at the physical performance of wrestling. If they haven't figured out their character to the point where people are gonna, like, when they hear that music, they're gonna go, "Oh," right? Or when they walk out and do that pose, they're gonna pop. It doesn't matter how technically good you are. Similarly, it doesn't matter how technically good your product is if you haven't figured out your character as a company, which is your brand, right? Which is your identity. And your goal as a wrestler, meaning as a startup, as a company, is to win over your audience. It's to get them to cheer you and boo your competition, more or less, right? And in wrestling, there is this goal of winning championship belts. You have like the heavyweight championship, and then you have like the mid-level one, which in WWE it's the Intercontinental Championship, right? And so there's all these different types of championship belts that, you know, the writers are like, okay, who deserves to win the best belt? Who deserves to hold the middle belt, et cetera, et cetera. And let's have matches, you know, to make sure that this person wins. You're in that same game, right? Like every day is a new, like, wrestling card, essentially, or wrestling program that you're entering, and your goal as a startup is to win the championship belt. And what does that mean in this world? It's revenue growth. It is getting acquired, or it is IPOing, right? Those are the championship belts that exist in this landscape. And the only way you're going to do that is if you win over your audience. But again, you can have the best product in the world. You can be the best technically sound wrestler, aka the best product. But if you can't figure out how to make your audience care, you're gonna be out of a job.
I have to ask you about pitching, right?
Yeah.
In the world that I live in, I tend to teach people, sales professionals, not to pitch, because a pitch is a monologue. And we have been talking about learning, understanding, and focusing on starting a conversation. A conversation is a dialogue. A pitch is a monologue. Where do you see the role of pitching? Kind of demystify this for us. Where is pitching the most, where does it have a place?
Yeah. Well, so what my company specializes in is in creating the pitch, right? And helping figure out that right pitch. And this is where, we're going to debate this all day, but I think this idea of, you don't want to pitch, I think it's really just like how you choose to phrase it or not. In my opinion, everything is a pitch at the end of the day, right? When I go to the electronics store to buy a TV, and I'm not sure, that representative on the floor has to pitch me on what I should be buying. They got to listen to me, but they still got to pitch me ultimately, right? When I am trying to convince my wife we should go to this specific restaurant for dinner, or we should get a dog, I have to pitch her on that, and vice versa. She's like, oh, like, let's go here for vacation. She's got to pitch me on that idea. Every day, nearly everything we do is some form of a pitch. When a politician gets on TV or gets on the microphone, right? What are they doing? They are pitching their ideas. And this is also why I say, everything at the end of the day is a communication problem. Like any issue that comes up is actually a communication problem. If you have even when you think you have like a product issue, in reality, it's probably a communication issue, because maybe you didn't tell the person on your team to do things, or maybe they heard something the wrong way, and then the app had a bug in it or whatever it might be, right? So everything's really a communication issue. So that's why I say, right, like that's everything's a pitch, and a pitch doesn't have to mean it is a long monologue, right? You can pitch something in a short amount of time. You can pitch something after you've listened to someone, and then your pitch is modified. Your pitch can and probably should be a dialogue. So it's just a matter of how you choose, like what lens do you choose to look at it through? And the lens I look at it through is, everything's a pitch. And the other thing I'll say too is, like, you got to know what you're going to say to your people, right? And I know that you want to understand where they're coming from first, but not everyone is going to want to talk before you. Even as try as you may, some people will say, no, you go first. And in those cases, you've got to know what you want to say. You can't just be like, well, I cannot possibly figure out what to tell you about our company at all until you tell me about your company first for 10 minutes, right? So you got to be prepared. And you probably know enough about your market anyways to know essentially what they're going to say, right? And in ideal situations, they've talked first. Yeah. In ideal situations, they've talked first. And then you can modify the pitch based on what you've heard slightly to be more relevant. But I think everyone needs to understand, like, how to talk about themselves, how to talk about their company in a way that can attract attention and kind of inspire conversation.
Can I just go back? I read something you wrote recently about framing, right?
Yeah.
Can you give us this context of pitching and framing?
Yeah, to me, so framing is one aspect of pitching, right? It's like a subcategory of pitching, and I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I literally, I think I just wrote that this week. And I'm happy I did, because it really formulated a lot that I had been thinking on for a while, but didn't have it all articulated yet. So essentially, framing is the lens through which you choose to declare information about something, right? It is the perspective or the point of view that you put on something. And so the examples I was writing about in that blog post or actually it was in our newsletter, were all about like how you can frame data, numbers, and statistics, trends. And what you'll notice is the vast majority of companies, they provide a neutral take on numbers. So if you take something like the video game industry, right, for example, and let's use kind of like a startup investor pitch as an example here, right? You have to know, in nearly every startup investor pitch, you got to like talk about industry size or market size. And so what you'll see is most of these startups will present the information from a neutral standpoint. So I did this Google search on video game industry growth, right? And you get like 100, and it was a Google image search. And you get, 100 results, probably 98% of those results, you get these charts and graphs that say things like video game industry revenue, 2018 through 2020, video game industry growth, 2019, gaming sector performance, last 5 years. And then you have the bar chart, the graph, whatever graphic might be underneath it. And that's great. I mean, it's fine. But when you see that header and then you look at the graph as the audience, you're deciding what you want to care about in that slide, for example, or in that graphic. If it says, video game revenue last 3 years, you can look at 3 different bars on that graph. You could look at 2018, 2019, 2020. And even if it's been on an up tilt, you get to decide what you care about in that. But if you apply framing, now you put perspective on the data. You showcase the data through the lens that you want your audience to view it through. And the lens you want them to view it through is helping shape the overall narrative you're trying to get across. So the really good example I found was this company called Charter, which does, they're literally just an online news publication that just, they literally like specialize in framing data to help you better understand certain news stories. It's just really good visual storytelling. And so they had a chart, they had a recent article on video games. And this is what triggered writing this whole article for me. They had a chart on video games, and what they did was they applied framing by comparing video game growth to movie ticket sales. So now you've got a point of reference to work off of, right? Something else that's big. And then the header they applied to that was video games outperformed the box office by a lot. And then from there, you look at the data on the chart and you see, and I think it's like video games are at $93 billion and movie tickets are at $39 billion. So the exact inverse number. And you're like, whoa, that's crazy. I didn't realize video games had gotten so big. And it's because of how they framed it. Video games outperform the box office by a lot. As the audience, it's nearly impossible to think of anything else other than, whoa, video games are bigger than movies. That seems like a pretty big deal. You almost skip over actually looking at the chart because of the way it's framed, right? Because they've provided you with the lens that you should be consuming that information through. And I do want to caveat by saying, I'm not saying make up numbers, right? That's not the point here. Point is, if you are telling a story, you're trying to get across your point of view, you're trying to shape a narrative, you've got to apply this technique of framing so that way from start to finish, the narrative carries through that you want to be put out there. You're not leaving room for interpretation, or letting them come to their own conclusions. You're shaping the conclusions for them.
I mean, to anyone listening, what you've just explained goes beyond powerful. Do you find, Rajiv, just quick, that when you're a startup, you believe in your product, you believe in what you're doing, and you tend to speak of this is really important, or that is really important, or the way that we're doing this is really important. But to me, listening, I'm like, you talk very passionately about this, but you haven't even shown me any reference to what you're saying. It's just what you believe in. Is this what you're saying? Is this what typically happens? And do you find that when a startup frames what they do and how they do it differently from everybody else, and when they adopt this framing approach, that they become much more convincing and powerful in those 3 situations that
absolutely. Yes. I funny enough, I made a conscious decision a few years ago to stop using the word absolutely, but this is a case where I will say absolutely. And because especially in a startup pitch, like you're trying to get other people to see the world the way you see the world. And so the only way you can effectively do that is by framing information. One example is an investor pitch deck we worked on for this company here in Chicago called Honest Game. They ended up first raising $50K from the Chicago Bulls, and then, or as part of a thing with the Chicago Bulls, then they raised a couple $1 million after that. But one of the most powerful portions in that pitch was when we talked about some of these trends in the industry. There was this slide that talked about, like, and just for reference point, Honest Game's industry is youth sports and high school sports. And there was this slide that talked about, just the overall market size of, and it was like, youth sports is a whatever, $14 billion industry, which is something that, like, the average person could be like, all right, sure. Seems fair enough. But nothing that, like, necessarily is making you think differently. Because you're just like, yeah, I mean, a startup should be pitching a big industry. Otherwise, why are they even there anyways? You don't, like, why are you presenting the fax machine industry that's been declining for the last 30 years? Right? So, but then we paired that with, I don't remember the exact number, but I believe it was 1 in 5 families spend more on youth sports than they do on their own mortgage. Literally, look at what you just did. You just mouthed the word wow.
Wow. Yeah. I didn't know that.
And that's something that's right. You literally you said it. Wow, I didn't know that. You're saying to yourself, I never thought of it like that before, right? And that's something that really pushes the issue forward to say, this is a big deal. It's not just my own belief. It really is a big deal. And if 1 in 5 families are spending more on this than they are on their own house, just think about what they are willing to do to make sure their kid's going to be successful in sports. Think about what that means for our product success.
I love that. Right, Rajiv, mail is knocking. Your door is ringing. Your doorbell is ringing, and it's the postman with a letter, special seal. And you've just received a letter letting you know that this year you are one of the nominees for Best New Artist category at the Grammy Awards. And you have also been asked to sing and to perform. Do you know, I don't know why, call me a freak, but every time I hear you sing, this goes back to your creativity. You're so creative. But I'm always trying to picture in my mind what you're wearing. And you and I are doing a game with our listeners right now, right? Because you promised to show us an idea of, like, what you would be wearing, right? So this is
totally
Raj Nation supporting you for Best New Nominee at the Grammys. What are you wearing? Show us.
Yeah, so basically what I would be wearing is, so like this sweater you see here, I'd probably get a new version of it that's a little less beaten down. This is a Run DMC sweater, okay? I'd probably wear this or another, like, similar, like, hip hop art, like this, or like a Wu-Tang Clan sweater, like crew neck sweater,
so you're going
with a blazer over it. Even though it's my song, I'd still just wear, like an artist that I like, or it'd be a crew neck of, like, the Startup Hype Man logo, one of those. But we're talking crew neck sweater with a blazer over it, jogger pants that are like kind of like suit jogger pants, with a pair of crisp Air Jordan 1s, probably in the Hype Man blue kind of color scheme, like white and light blue. And then I would definitely I don't know if you've seen some of my photos or seen me do some stuff where I get, like, graphic designs drawn in my hair by a barber, or cut into my hair.
You do it for real, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, so like when I get my hair cut, I'll have the barber, cut a design into the side of my head.
That's right.
Not cut my head. They will, using the shears and the clippers, they will buzz a design into the side of my head. So I would definitely get a fresh cut with a nice design as well.
It's been a huge privilege to talk with you. And you got pearls of wisdom coming out of your ear, coming out of your pores, Rajiv. Right, you got pearls of wisdom. You're just sweating them out, and we're loving it. You're welcome here anytime. We really love what you represent, the work that you're doing, how you're helping startups to build that pitch to really stand out in their market, grab their investment, grab the support, build whatever it is they're building, changing the world as we know it. So thank you so much for your time, for sharing with us all this wisdom, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you, Rajiv.
Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.